Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new session with Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative. Today, we are lucky again to have Christin Lee, an immigration lawyer who's been an immigrant herself, to talk to us about a very important and timely topic, which is potential applicant struggling to immigration to Canada. Christin, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you, Heatham. So with the Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative, I will be giving you a brief overview on potential applicants and international students that are struggling with the current immigration system. I will briefly talk about the changes that's coming up and current programs and what you should expect from the immigration based on my experience. So today I will be talking first about an update on the issuance of postgraduate work permits. Then I will talk about the changes in spousal work permits. And I will talk to you about current open programs for immigration at the moment. And I will be letting you know briefly about education requirement, language requirement, job offer letter, work experience requirement, employer requirement, and the question that I get frequently, are there any program by which you can extend your work permits? And then I'll be talking about humanitarian and compassionate application. So there has been a change on the issuance postgraduate work permits as of November 1st, 2024. So what's important to note is that any postgraduate work permit that you applied prior to November 1st, 2024 will be processed pursuant to the old regulation. So based on the changed requirements, the immigration is basically saying that if you went to college, if you went to pursued post-secondary education, that's less than university, they will give you postgraduate work permits only if you studied one of these criteria, being agriculture and agri-food, education, healthcare, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, trade, and transport. So these sectors basically signal they are basically sectors where there is a shortage of labor in Canada. They also have a language requirement for postgraduate work permits. For university graduates, the immigration is requiring that you obtain level 7 English or level 7 French in all four. So reading, comprehension, speaking, listening, and writing. If you went to college or if you attended non-university graduates, they are saying that they will give you a postgraduate work permit only if you receive level 5 English or level 5 French. There is also a change in spousal work permits. Previously, they used to give out work permits to spouses, to international students that were working full-time. Now, as of January 21, 2025, the spousal work permit requirement has become a lot more strict. So again, January 25, 2025 is an important deadline because if you applied before this date, they will be processed pursuant to the old regulation. I'm assuming that a lot of the spousal work permits that have not been processed yet, although you applied prior to this date. So to obtain spousal work permit, immigration is requiring that the international spouse, the spouse that's studying at the moment as an international student, be enrolled in master's programs that are 16 months or longer, doctoral programs, or select professional and eligible programs. They are also saying that they will give spousal work permits of spouses of foreign workers only if they're employed in Tier 0 or Tier 1 occupations, or Tier 2 or 3 occupations in sectors with labor shortages or linked to government priorities. So at the moment, these sectors are natural and applied sciences, construction, healthcare, natural resources, education, sports, and military sectors. Before you invite your spouse on an open work permit, the foreign worker must have at least 16 months remaining on their current work permit as well. The current open programs in Ontario: Express Entry, Ontario Immigration Nominee Program. So International Student Stream is one of the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program, and In-Demand Skills Stream, that's also part of Ontario Immigration Nominee Program. And there are pop-up programs or pilots that come about without announcement. So currently we have a home caregiver pilot opening on March 31st, 2025. And there is humanitarian and compassionate application. So about Express Entry, the system is extremely competitive at the moment. But my recommendation is to always have your profile floating, because you don't know when the points will drop, if the government will drop the scores. You always want to have it floating, okay? You also don't know when your occupation will become demanded. So I will be going through a list of requirements that you want to be aware of in case your occupation becomes an in-demand skills stream. There are a lot of jobs under in-demand skills stream at the moment. My recommendation is always have your profile ready so that you can apply anytime. Anytime there's a pop-up program or your job becomes an in-demand skills, falls under the in-demand skills stream. Pop-up programs, there's a home caretaker pilot program. I think there will continue to be pilots based on the need of the labor market. So it's always wise to have to have everything ready. And lastly, I will talk about humanitarian and compassionate application. That depends on where you're from and your personal circumstances. Sometimes we are able to fit profiles under the humanitarian compassionate application and able to apply for permanent residence that way. So we always recommend that you have your education profile ready. Most of the programs, most of the economic programs, they require that you have education that's equivalent to Canadian high school diploma or higher. We always recommend that you get the equivalency at WES, so World Education Services. If you try to do it after there's a program for your occupation, it may be too late, because the WES also has a processing time. And right now, immigration is very, very competitive. Everything's happening very fast. So you want to get all your paperwork ready, especially regarding your education. It's the same thing with the language requirement. I always advise that you have your English score handy. So it depending on the occupation, they will have different language requirements. The minimum I've seen is at least the minimum of level 4 English or French. And they must be less than 2 years old. If they expire, you just want to get it done again, even if there is no program for you at the moment. Historically, what happened is that sometimes there are these really good programs that open up that's good for your profile, and you don't have your language test. In that case, all the language test centers, they become booked during that period of time. My recommendation is that always have it ready. Don't leave it till the last minute. Minimum of English level 4, it may not even be very difficult for you. So you might as well get it done. For English, the type of test that are accepted, it's IELTS, International English Language Testing System, and there's also CELPIP, Canadian English Language Proficiency Index. I think there is another one that's fairly new. And then for French, there is TEF, Test d'évaluation de français, and then TCF, Test de connaissance du français. All the test bookings are done online. Most of these economic programs, they usually require a job offer letter, which is usually accepted in the form of employment contract, job offer letter. Oftentimes, they ask the employers to fill out a form as well. Oftentimes, there's a work experience requirement. It's not always 1 year. Sometimes it's 9 months or more. But I wanted to talk about how full-time and part-time is calculated. There are a lot of questions about how this is to be calculated because about the calculation. So full-time is considered 30 hours a week. So for 1 year, it'll be 1560 hours. What's important is that even if you work like 35 hours a week or 60 hours a week, then it's still gonna be considered a full-time. They're not gonna consider it like 2 years when you worked a lot of hours in 1 year. It's just that it's minimum of 30 hours. On the other hand, 15 hours a week is considered a part-time job. So if you worked 15 hours a week for 24 months, and if you hold another part-time job where you work 15 hours for 24 months, you can qualify for 1 year full-time. And you also want to be aware that you can work as many part-time jobs as you need to meet this requirement. So if you are full-time at more than one job, or if you work more than 30 hours at one job, it's still considered 1 year full-time. They're not gonna give you 2-3 hours because you worked so much more than 30 hours a week. Sometimes there is an employer requirement, not always. I find that the requirements for pilots are usually much lesser than the provincial programs, but sometimes the immigration requires that the business have been active at least 3 years prior to submitting your application. And sometimes the immigration wants you to demonstrate, wants to know that the employer made an effort to recruit a Canadian employee, so Canadian citizen or permanent resident, prior to offering the position to the foreign worker. And then sometimes there is an income requirement. Oftentimes it's $1 million in total gross annual revenue for GTA area, and minimum of $500,000 in total gross annual revenue outside of GTA. So for example, London. Lastly, there is a PowerPoint missing on work permit extension programs. I get a lot of questions on whether they can apply to extend a work permit. So their work permit, currently to my knowledge, there isn't. But there are 2 ways of doing it, essentially. You can ask your employer if they can help you to obtain LMIA. That stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment. So it means that the employer will essentially, apply to the immigration to show that they need a foreign worker. So there's also income requirement, and you do want to ask your employer if they're willing to do it. And basically the employer will have to show that they made reasonable effort to hire a Canadian permanent resident or citizen, but they could not, and so they really need this foreign worker to work in their for their business. You do want to ask for that. Another thing is called a TRP. It's called a temporary resident permit. You can apply temporary resident permit, and it basically means you're basically asking for a resident temporary permit to stay and work in Canada. So you can certainly apply for it, and then while you apply for a decision, you basically get what is called maintained status or implied status, which you can oftentimes use towards your application. So that's on work permit extension. Lastly, I will talk about humanitarian compassionate application. So humanitarian and compassionate application it's essentially to be used for those requiring humanitarian exemption, but it's also, based on my experience, it's also been used for international students who could not fit in their profile for a certain who could not for the immigration programs that are open. So humanitarian compassionate application, unlike other programs, it is not a checkmark test. They basically weigh all the factors, and the officer makes a decision. It's fairly discretionary, knowing we don't know how the decision will be made. In the economic programs, it's like you met your job offer requirement check mark, you met your language requirement check mark, you met the work experience requirement check mark, and then it's like welcome to Canada. But humanitarian compassionate application, it's not as obvious. And again, it depends on who you have as a decision maker, so it's very difficult to predict the outcome. That being said, the factors that humanitarian compassionate application looks at is establishment in Canada. So basically, that is evaluated oftentimes by support letters from your friends and family in Canada. Oftentimes, they can write a letter about their relationship to you, and their involvement and your involvement in their lives. And then you can also show your inability to leave Canada that has led to establishment. So this is especially applicable for younger students who spent about 5 years here, and they're much of their university life and work experience was in Canada, and the working condition at their home countries is significantly different than that of Canada. So ties to Canada, the immigration will basically look at whether you have a car in Canada, do you have insurance, do you have a house, any assets you own, in addition to the relationship you have. And then best interest of any children affected. So that's actually another, health is another one, but best interest of any children. If you have minor children, what are the consequences of returning the children to your home country? Sometimes these children were born in Canada, or they came to Canada when they were 1 or 2 years old, and their adaptation is such that they've only been to school in Canada and they speak English much better than the mother tongue of their parents. So the immigration will look at those factors. Health considerations. So one of the principles in the humanitarian application is that if your home country is not able to provide for your healthcare needs, you should not be removed. So so basically they're saying it's inhuman to have a person returned to a country where they're not able to take care of you. And one thing that is not there is also there are a certain list of countries where Canada do not remove people to because of it's a war affected area or the country's going through natural disasters. So usually if you're from one of these countries, it can also be made into an argument. Family violence considerations. Um, Basically, some people come here to avoid violence at home. So you can certainly, if that is the case, it is something to be brought up. Consequence of your separation from your relatives. So if you are in Canada and a lot of your family members live here and you're a great cousin to a newborn baby or other people in the family and you guys are such a tight-knitted family, then the immigration will also look at how your relatives in Canada will be impacted by you leaving Canada. So factors in your country of origin. So it says it's not related to seeking protection. So it signifies that it's not really it's not a refugee claim. But like I said, if your country is going through a severe crisis, they will look at it. What are you likely to go through if you go back? So they will look at you have a college degree in Canada and you can maintain a certain quality of living in Canada. But if you go back, how would you be treated? Are you able to get a job? How are you likely to be treated in the workforce? Or as a young person, are you going to have a upward moving mobility? So they will be looking at those factors. And it says there are any other relevant factors. One thing that the Canadian websites don't mention, but I frequently see, is that they actually care about your Canadian experience, professional experience, and your economic establishment. So if you have worked consistently for 3 years with your postgraduate work permit, a lot of my clients did get their permanent residence that way. Their job was not in demand during the time they were in Canada, but they worked diligently for 3 years, nonstop in demanded areas. So oftentimes that was in PSW or construction, but really any type of work experience is good. Canada just wants to see that you're a hard-working person. I find that clients like that, they tend to have a higher success rate. So that is something to be considered. So if you are, and they also look at whether you could have gotten permanent residence by one of the existing economic programs. And if you really couldn't, it says that they should evaluate your profile under this application. So that is humanitarian compassionate considerations applications for you. I'm wondering if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much, Christine, for this informative presentation. And yes, we are getting some questions here. So, what are the legal rights for temporary workers under the Canadian immigration laws? We've got this question on one of our social media platforms.
Okay, so Canadian employers in general, we have the same responsibility towards foreign workers as we do towards Canadian workers. It's just that foreign workers, their right to work is limited by the expiration date under their work permit. But I don't know if you but they have the same rights as we do towards Canadian workers.
Thank you so much, Christine.
What legal mechanisms are available to challenge immigration decisions in Canada? So you can always appeal a decision. You can consult an immigration lawyer for that. Certain decisions are more appealable than other decisions. For example, oftentimes it's like decisions on temporary resident work permits. We recommend that you reapply rather than you bring an appeal at federal court, only because the cost of bringing in an appeal at federal court is thousands of dollars, whereas the cost of reapplying is a few $100s. That's not to say that immigration does not make mistakes, but that's oftentimes what ends up happening. You always have a right to appeal immigration decisions. Which court it'll go to, it depends, right? So it can be federal court, it can be immigration and refugee board. It really depends on the type of decision we are facing.
Thank you so much. We have another question here.
So another question is, how does Canada address the needs of refugees and asylum seekers within its immigration system? So we continue to the refugee program is still open, and the system is still ongoing. I think we continue to care about the needs of refugees, housing needs, and we also offer English classes and French classes for refugee asylums. Within the immigration system, we have a place called RPD, Refugee Protection Board, where we hear the claims, and they also have right to challenge the decision, and the rights of the refugees are addressed that way.
Thank you so much, Christine. So another question, is there any provincial nominee program that could be better than other programs? Based on what I understand, is there a provincial nominee program that related to such province that could be better than others?
Provincial programs, so Ontario one is pretty tough, right? So there are, I couldn't talk about every single province programs during this presentation, but other provinces programs are known to be more easier. For example, Atlantic programs, they require a job offer. From what I heard, as soon as their program opened up, a lot of people just moved there, and they got a job from one of the authorized employers. So there's a lot of mobility within Canada based on the provincial immigration programs, because people are just moving to another province for their permanent residence. Ontario one is really, really tough. Atlantic one is just slightly easier, and other provinces, and Quebec is also fairly close. Other provinces the other provinces tend to be slightly easier.
Thank you so much. And actually, we have a very important question here.
What challenges do temporary foreign workers face in Canada regarding employment rights and protection? Based on my experience, I can tell you that my clients have moved to another province to be able to get labor market impact assessment, LMIA work permit. And the employers, they do not pay people very well. They pay extremely minimum or less under the promise that they will be given labor market impact assessment, which a lot of employees are desperate for, because that would give them the legal right to stay in Canada and work in Canada. Oftentimes, these employers, they do not pay their employees correctly. They abuse their labor because they know that they're so desperate to stay. So I have seen those situations. I have also seen workers that are overworked, right? They work 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day, but they cannot say anything just because they really need the money. And oftentimes, these foreign workers, they're sending money back home, back to their families. So they just don't say anything. They just do whatever the employer asks them to do. I've also heard of employers that take their passports away to take away their right to return home or work for anywhere else. So I have seen that. I've also had clients that lived in a very, very bad environment. Sometimes the farm workers, they're put in in a room with 8 people, and it really isn't much heating or air conditioning. They just sleep there and they're fed and they're just left to work. So I have seen that before. A lot of them, they don't dare say anything because they really need the job. So I have seen that before.
Which is a big unfortunate.
It is extremely unfortunate, and it continued to be extremely underreported. Yeah.
So I'm taking a final look on our social media platforms to see if we got any new questions, saying once, saying twice. Okay, so at the end of this session, Christin, thank you so much for giving us from your experience, time, and that knowledge. We appreciate your help and support. Thank you so much for everything you have done for us today.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Thank you. And for everyone, as always, stay safe, stay well, and we are looking forward to see you at another session with Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.